We had testimony on H401 yesterday, and we are looking at, we will be looking at an amendment to that bill. I don't know that we're going to see that this afternoon. It may be tomorrow, but in the meantime, we asked JFO to take a look at the bill, and the amendment won't change, I think, anything that you're going to be sharing with us now. So I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Sure thing. For the record, Ted Barnett, Joint Fiscal Office. I mostly came to provide you all some context and scope of the four fees that are referenced in H401. And so this is shown on table one. It breaks down the non-bakery food manufacturing establishment fees, and then your three levels of different bakery food manufacturing fees. And from what I understand, you're looking to make the non-bakery fees apply to folks making gross receipts over $30,000 and have the $275 fee that applies to folks who are making more than $50,000 now apply to folks making $30,000. So when you do that and also exempt bakery folks, kind of on net, you're really seeing a minimal reduction in revenue for Vermont Department of Health Food and Lodging Fee Fund. We, within the scope, I mean, it's certainly, I don't know, doing the math, it's quite small. Looking at around $10,000, $15,000. Unfortunately, the Vermont Department of Health doesn't collect information on gross receipts of these different entities, so we can't really pin this down exactly, except to comment that looking at the rule for small commercial and large commercial establishments, they have to make investments in equipment or locations, and it means that they're probably making more than $30,000 in gross receipts. So that places them outside of the exemption. So mainly wanted to come and show you the number of licensees in each of these different categories and the estimated revenue that is derived. So this would be under current law. And you can use this to kind of think through different math permutations of the effects of the bill.
So looking at the table, the first row of the table shows the non-bakeries who are currently licensed and reporting receipts between 10 and 50,000. They pay $175 in a fee, and that roughly adds up to 15,000 annually.
Exactly.
Okay. And the bill contemplates changing the 10,000 to 30,000, and that would then reduce that 15,000 by some number, but we don't know how much exactly.
Exactly. And if the provision is to make it so that everyone is paying the $275 fee that applies to folks who are above 50,000, that would, I would roughly estimate to say that the number of licensees going from the exemption being at 10,000 to 30,000, you split this 86 in half. Yeah. And say there are 43 licensees that would pay that higher threshold fee. And so that would net some of the estimated revenue loss.
Okay. Yeah. Richard?
Yeah, that's what I was, exactly where I was going. I almost think it would wash it.
So in any case, it would be a pretty small number. It would be less than $15,000, presumably. Although, yeah.
Presumably, and yes, it's hard to pin down for sure, as I mentioned, since the Department of Health doesn't collect gross receipts of these establishments. The other thing I would note is we use the word minimal. You'll also hear JFO occasionally use the word de minimis impact. And so within the context of the Food and Lodging Fee Fund, which received $1.48 million in revenue in fiscal year 24 from various food and lodging fees, it's about 1%. And so in that scope and context, where really we would use kind of, it's like a de minimis is a more official way to say it. Minimal is kind of the same thing, but we're thinking about the same thing. It's small within the context of the fund.
And I would say if the pie maker made a few more pies and sold them to a restaurant and they got sold out at 9% rooms and meals tax, they'd make their money back.
Okay,
Question, on the small bakery, small commercial, what was that limit at? Remember they had, was that up to 10,000 or no, was that 10 to?
6,500 was the non-certified rate.
Okay,
So above 6,500.
$125, please.
yeah, so, and the home, I think the home bakery category is the one we're really looking at here. And we don't know, I guess, Ted, we don't know any more than what you're showing us about home bakeries, but it's 10,000 currently. Roughly, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, to note that once you start getting into the small commercial category, Department of Health provided me with they have to have certain types of equipment. And investments in that equipment means that they're probably a larger business that's earning more in gross receipts. So I wouldn't see very many, but some home businesses that have commercial equipment could fall under the small commercial category. So that's why I didn't make any hard and fast kind of projections on the different categories. Do want to note that, but by the time you get to large commercial, certainly they have a facility, they have all sorts of specialized equipment. They're probably they're likely not going to be impacted by. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the takeaway here is that the impact on state revenues would be, what's the word you usually use? De minimis?
Minimus,
Yeah.
yes.
Words, yeah, okay. All right, well, I know you had another place you needed to be, Ted, so thank you for making time to stop here briefly.
Absolutely.
We're all good with questions? Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank
Of
you.
course, yep. Have a great afternoon.
We can pause for a minute before we So we're going to now have Ledge Council walk through an amended version of H401. So when we met yesterday, do you need permission?
I need a link.
Okay.
Okay. I need a link. Yours? Yes. Let's see.
Let me see if I can do it from the. Okay.
Every time.
Hang on, sorry, say that again, Kate.
Hello, Katie McLean, Office of Legislative Counsel. We have H401 and we have Amendment 1.1. There were no changes that were made in the legislative intent section. There were changes made in the fee section. So if you remember, we had two categories. We had a non-bakery category and we had a bakery category. So what this does is it says that if you are above $30,000 in what your gross receipts, then you pay $275. Currently, it's $50,000. And then it breaks down people who are at or below 30,000 into two categories. Non-home operated food service establishments, they would still have a fee and need to get a license, and their fee is $175. And then there's the group of people who are home operated food service establishments with gross receipts at or less than 30,000, and they are exempt pursuant to 4358. We'll look at 4358 because we have some changes there too, but the idea is that if you produce food at home for under $30,000, you are exempt from the fee and the license. Then we have similar changes in the next section on bakeries. So you'll see we have the home bakery with gross receipts over 30,000, but then in subdivisions 4 and 5, or Roman numeral 4 and 5, we're again breaking down that category of at or under 30,000 into two groups, the non-home operated bakeries and then the home operated bakeries. So if there is a non-home operated bakery that's earning under 30,000, they are still subject to a fee, $50 fee, and they're still subject to having to get a license. If they are operating at home with gross receipts at or below 30,000, they are exempt. And then we look at the language with regard to the exemption, and I've tried to hopefully clean this up a little to make it clearer. Right now it says the provisions of this chapter shall not apply to, which is a little vague. So I've changed that to the licensure requirements and related licensure fees. And this chapter shall not apply to a food manufacturing establishment operating a home kitchen whose average gross retail sales are less than or equal to 30,000 per year. So we're not distinguishing between, right now it says just a home bakery or just bakery products. So now it's not distinguishing. It would apply to both non-bakery and bakery categories.
And instead of a weekly number, it's an annual number.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you, Katie. And can you just remind us why this language is needed, or whether it is needed, given the earlier section?
Sure. So the previous sections have this language about an exemption pursuant to 4358. So what exactly is being exempted isn't clear right there. So this is to make it clear that what is being exempted is licensure and licensure fees. It also hopefully addresses, there's some current sort of it's not coordinated, it's not parallel in terms of the fact that the current language just applies to bakery products from somebody's home kitchen, even though the fee structures in non-bakery products says there's an exemption. So that is a little bit ambiguous. And so this attempts to sort of be clear about who is carved in and who is carved out of the exemption.
Is anybody who conceivably who's currently in this business who's not paying a fee, is anybody going to be now paying a fee? Going back to the $50 cap.
No,
because that's a big one.
I mean, potentially, let me think about this. So right now, non-home bakeries who are operating 125 a week aren't paying a fee. So that's 6,500 a year. So this threshold is much higher, actually, the 30,000. So it wouldn't capture them. And then I think the same thing is true for the non-bakery group. The threshold was lower, but it was also pretty unclear how we were treating these people, this group of people who are producing food in their home. That's the ambiguity, and the department has decided to interpret it one way, but the statute wasn't crystal clear on that.
And I know that the department has, because the statute isn't crystal clear, they have developed rules to add some clarity.
Mhm.
And I don't know whether you're familiar enough with those rules to say whether this would require an update to the rules with it, whether.
I would have to look at the rules. I
Okay.
have them, but I haven't looked at whether an update would be required.
Well, if that's what it would be necessary, then, that can happen. I guess that's not the end of the world.
Mhm. Probably it would have to be required anyway, because you're changing the threshold from the 125 to the 30,000.
Okay. So just stepping back, the intent, I mean, we have a lot of findings there, legislative intent language, but we're fundamentally trying to make an inflation adjustment, A, and then B, clean up some ambiguity in the statute. And I think that's what we've done here. So,
Hopefully.
yeah. Thank you. Any questions, committee?
Good job explaining.
Okay.
We will, we could post this version. I think maybe we already have posted it. Yeah.
Is that the one that you sent me today?
Did you send more than one today or?
I only sent one, but I think I only sent it to you.
Okay, well,
But
make sure it gets posted.
I will send it to you right now.
Okay, great.
And then we'll have, if there may be more discussion about it tomorrow, if we hear any more, if we get more input, otherwise we'll be voting on this version.
Yeah, I just have the as introduced version.
Okay, I just sent it to you, so you should have the new version.
Wondered how the Department of Health gonna deal with the non-bakery items. They seemed a little bit concerned about those.
So, yeah, and what I suggested was that if they hadn't, they're welcome to continue the conversation tomorrow, although we are trying to keep it open as long as possible. If there isn't a good, solution to that right now, they can continue the conversation when this bill goes to the next step. And
Yeah.
I think we would welcome that. Yeah.
That's right.
But I want to get the ball, I think we want to get the ball started.
Yeah. And then we can have a conference of committees.
Well, that could, at the end of the day, be what happens. Yeah. Yeah, we know about those now.
Now, so we're agriculture, food resiliency and
Thank you, Katie.
forestry. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Who deals with food resiliency on the Senate side?
That's a good question. There isn't a committee that has its title. And I don't know whether it's in the, sort of the explanatory language of each committee's jurisdiction, but I think you're right. I think that it would default to the Ag Committee. However, I think I mentioned this before, this bill being a health, the title is the health, department title, which Human Services normally be looking at. They graciously allowed us to do the work on this bill. And in the Senate, therefore, it might not be Ag, it might be their equivalent of Human Services. All right, let's call it a day. Thanks, everybody.